Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Nice to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming out and doing this really important talk. I think I've made it mandatory for students to come, and I put in big bold capital letters that it has to be mandatory. I want to start by saying Toronto Film School is probably one of the most diverse schools that you will ever find around. It's just an incredible mix of races, cultures, sexual preferences, genders, everything, right? And so it's interesting because John Tory, when he came to the school and we opened up our building, it was actually the first thing that he said when he was making his speeches. He walked in on campus for about 20 minutes, walked around the building, started his speech, and he said, wow, this is a true representation of the city. And he was, we're very proud of that. I know the faculty talks a lot about it. Andrew Moody is now texting that he has internet problems, but he'll be joining us, I'm sure, hopefully momentarily or when he gets that solved. But he often talks about that too, is this idea that we are such a diverse student body. And so with everything going on in the world right now, it just came to me that I thought it was really important that we address this as a school. Morning, Andrew. Welcome.
Andrew Moody.
Andrew, turn on your...
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Great. I was just talking about how it's just such a diverse student body. It's such and also faculty. And Andrew often talks about that for him. And I know Rosanna has mentioned, and lots of people talk about how diverse it is and how exciting that is to be a part of such a community. So with everything going on, it's really important that we address these topics. I know I've scheduled it for an hour, and whoever can stay longer, we're open to going beyond that because there's so many varied opinions. I know that right now the hot topic is what's happening in the States and all over the world, but I wanted to open it up to making it more of a diverse panel so we can talk about all kinds of things that not only occur politically, but also in the industry and then also in our school system and what we can do to improve that and change that moving forward. So I'm going to let you guys talk a lot. So I'd love it if you can all introduce yourselves. I'm just going to go by what I see on my sort of Hollywood squares here. So Rosanna, just please a quick introduction, who you are, what you do, and we go from there.
Me, I start?
Yeah.
My name is Rosanna Saracino. I'm an instructor at the school. I work as an educator and also a director. My main focus is theater, though I've done dance, opera, film, etc. I also recently established a new organization called the Indie Arts Coalition, which in particular has been brought together to work to help independent artists and in particular marginalized artists as we face the many things we've faced over the last few months. So that's me.
Amazing. Yes. And I love that you brought in, why this is important to you today's and every day, these discussions.
Absolutely.
Chad, over to you.
Hi, I am Chad Taylor. I'm an instructor at the film school in the acting program, also an alumni from the acting program. I have my own company, Tailored Films. I do a lot of indie stuff. I do casting, and I'm an LGBTQ community member.
Awesome. Ingrid Hart.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ingrid Hart. I'm an instructor at Toronto Film School. I teach the camera acting class. And my background is in performance arts. I also have my own business where I teach actors how to perform authentically. I teach privately. I have classes, weekly classes. And I think it's important that we get together, and I'm happy to be here with my peers and colleagues and students. This is the perfect platform to have this discussion. So appreciate it.
Great, for sure. Daniel Ramnoth.
Hi, everyone. I don't know how I follow that. We have such accomplished panelists. I'm just a guy. I'm an alumni. I graduated from both Seneca and Toronto Film School as an actor. Before I got into acting, I was a musician. I still do that. I TA currently at the school. I'm given the opportunity. I get to coach alongside John Cherry, Andrew Moody, John Higgins, and Ingrid as well, and you, Hart, when I get the chance to work with you. And this is the perfect, like Ingrid said, this is the perfect platform for us to have this discussion, because we have actors and art creators of all creeds, races, and genders. And it's important, I think, to acknowledge that it comes from everywhere.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you. Adrian Curry.
Hi, Hart. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is an important topic, and I'm glad we're here discussing it today. I'm an actor and a filmmaker and a social planner, urban planner by trade. I sit on the board of directors of Cycle Toronto. I'm currently the vice president. I work for the Green Party of Canada. I sit on their federal council, which is their basically board of directors. I'm having Zoom calls with Elizabeth May on a weekly basis now. And I'm also working on a campaign to elect Annemie Paul as the leader of the Green Party, because Elizabeth May has stepped down. Working on federal council, we're dealing with issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. As you know, the Green Party is one of the least diverse parties there is. So this is a topic that's very dear to us and dear to me as well.
Yeah, and most importantly, Adrian played my best friend on my TV series Heart of the Annex.
That's why he looks so familiar.
That's why he's here, actually.
Which is not a far cry, because Hart and I are pretty good friends.
Yeah. Last but not least, Andrew Moody, who finally figured out his internet issues. But can you please go on unmute? Can you please unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. And I'm still having internet issues. I'm not sure what it is.
Oh, and it's going in and out. You're muted again.
I know. It's I love computers. Hi, so I'm Andrew Moody. I'm an actor, and I've been dealing with issues around diversity in the entertainment industry for a while.
Absolutely. And that's why you're here. And thank you, everyone. I want to get right into it. And obviously we're seeing what's going on in the world. And as I was saying, it's unfortunate that it took a man being murdered to essentially get this conversation going and change to start happening. What do you think what's happening right now? Maybe I'll start with you, Adrian. What do you think this has already done for the Black population?
Well, it's traumatic, first of all. It's very traumatic to see anyone die killed, murdered in broad daylight on air for the whole world to see. It's even more traumatic when it's another Black man. Now, the protest is a way to express our anger and our displeasure with the systems that we have in place. And it's a way to vent that frustration and that fear and that anger. The positive side is that it's put the issue at forefront of our society. I mean, we have many viruses to deal with now. We have COVID, and we have the virus of police brutality and white supremacy. We're finally starting to get some traction on that. The Minneapolis police forces, the Minneapolis City Council has voted to disband the Minneapolis police force. That is an important step. Many jurisdictions, such as Los Angeles and New York, are considering defunding the police to a certain extent and putting resources into other channels, such as social service workers and psychiatry work and whatnot. That is the good that's coming from this. What we need to do is continue to press and to make sure that more good.
Oh, Adrian stalled. Is Adrian stalled for all of you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But he was talking about something that I was going to jump to next, which is this idea of social services. And so what we do moving forward from here. One of the things that I worked on a number of years ago that I thought was really helpful for people in high priority neighborhoods, or what were deemed Toronto high priority neighborhoods, was we went in there and actually we were creating after school programs in high school so that students had something to do. And that was a big, it encouraged a lot of at-risk youth to get involved in something so that they kept themselves busy. So that's something I've thought we should see more of that. If we are going to defund the police, we should go to something like that. Ingrid, where do you think things could go moving forward?
Well, you know, I'm glad to see that public health has recognized that Africans who are descendants of colonialism, and you know, it's traumatic, and it needs to be tended to. And you know, because you know, I'm first generation Canadian, and you know, there are many of us out here, and we seem like we're doing okay. You know, like colonialism hasn't really affected me. You know, I'm a happy person, and but there are lasting effects that contribute to how we move in the world and how we see ourselves. And
Yeah.
so I'm glad to see that public health has recognized that there needs to be an opportunity for people to heal from these generational wounds, you see.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so this now you know, the protest, this has really opened people's eyes to the reality of what is still taking place and what has been happening for centuries.
Yeah.
Centuries. Yeah. So it's great to have the conversation and to bring it out in the open.
Andrew, what does that look like? Like as a Black man, what does that look like? I mean, I don't know what your experiences have been like, and Ingrid, you can comment to this as well, but for people, and Adrian, who's probably joining, what does it look like for a Black person, from a policing perspective? Because I don't even think I don't think I recognize what that actually means, and I think a lot of people don't. Andrew, if you want to take the
Yeah, I know. I feel very passionately about this, but the way I feel is very I feel very passionately about it, but it's also very controversial. And ultimately, I get very angry at the left. And the reason why I get very angry at the left is because many, many years ago, when Bob Rae was premier, there were many things he was fighting for, social programs he was fighting for to save, because he was handed a really bad economy. And the ways in which he was trying to save those social programs, the left didn't like. And so they abandoned him. And then we got many successive governments of Mike Harris, and he closed 24 hospitals, 6 psychiatric hospitals. He put people with psychiatric needs on the street. He destroyed social programs that were necessary. And if the left had not abandoned Bob Rae, that wouldn't have happened. And so now we are living in the consequences of that action. And the thing that makes me angry is that, I mean, you know, I've done a lot of research on the police because I wrote a play recently. It wasn't recently, it was like in 2009, but anyway.
And you're referring to Toronto the Good, which
yeah,
Chad directed, actually.
That's right.
Of Toronto the Good with a lot of our graduates.
That's right. And in doing research for that play about police violence, I did a ride along, and I did a deep dive into the funding of the police and their budgets, and what you learn is that actually the city of Toronto over successive years has actually not given the police their full budget or their full budget request. So you know, this idea of defunding the police, the city of Toronto has many, many times told the police that they won't get their full budget that they're requesting. But there are things within the budget that they've requested, especially when our new chief came on, that specifically were meant to deal with issues around police violence and dealing with the community, that are known to help, like body cams. We need body cams. They cost money. There's no better way to force police to be accountable than body cams. They're also within the police budget, there's a request for people who specifically work with diversity and issues of civil rights. And they just don't get that money. And what's the problem is, what happens is the police ask for money to help for police accountability, and the people on the right don't want that, so they don't want to give the police the money to help deal with accountability. And ultimately we are in this situation because there just have been successive right-wing governments that have defunded social programs. So like the program, like Hart, the program that you did after school is awesome, but the reason why you had to do that is because Mike Harris cut funding to schools and put in like this ridiculous 3 strikes law, so that if a kid does something bad 3 times, then he's kicked out of school. So now they're just on the street. Like there's so much damage that the Mike Harris government did to this province, to children, to people with mental health issues, to welfare, to everything. And ultimately, if the left hadn't abandoned Bob Ray, this wouldn't have happened. So
you know what my recognition, like so much of what I saw came, and the challenges that a lot of those youth faced was due to economics. It was so economically driven.
Because those social programs are cut.
Well, yeah, and this was an almost a private nonprofit organization that was having to then step up to fund the program. And what I did was I took money that they were giving me and I actually gave it to the youth so that they would come out and they wouldn't go on the street and deal drugs if that's what they were doing at that time, right?
Yeah.
Adrian, I'm going to throw this to you because I mean, Andrew's gotten into the political sphere, and as a member of the group,
I didn't mean to. Sorry.
No. That's what this is about, and we're gonna open this widely up. But I had a question. What do you think? How do you like? You're talking about blacks. I also want to bring this into homosexuals. How are they being represented in the Green Party and represented in Parliament, so that it's more inclusive? What do you think about that? And what can your party do with a lot of the issues that Andrew's talking about?
Well, I'll touch on Andrew's point first. We need to refund social programs. So now we've gone full circle. We've had them prior to Bob Ray, then we lost them under Mike Harris and successive austerity governments, and now we realize that we need them. So let's learn from what we've lived. Let's learn from our mistakes. And when we talk about defunding the police, it's particularly that. It's putting money back into social services. So instead of increasing and putting 50 or 100 more police officers on the ground, let's use that money or a large part of that money and channel it into social services and social programs. That's what we mean by defunding, reallocating our resources. Now, in terms of other equity-seeking groups in the House of Commons and Parliament, we as a political party, we have to actively go out and find candidates, find volunteers who want to run as representatives and support them, give them the training and the financial resources and get them into the position where they can run for office and hopefully be successful. That includes blacks, other people of color, Indigenous peoples, LGBTQ plus communities, women, people with disabilities, any equity seeking group out there. As an organization, whether it's a political party and whatnot, you have to actively support people, put them in this position where they can become successful. And then when we have representation across the board, then you'll have a more equitable system, because then people will see themselves in positions of power and want to be part of that organization and understand that change is possible, instead of being relegated to being a minority and not included in the decision-making process.
Yeah. Chad, do you see the LGBTQ community represented in Parliament? Like, do you relate to that, to what you're seeing in policies?
Honestly, like we've made a lot of traction in the last 4 or 5 years with LGBTQ plus rights and everything, but I don't see myself represented in Parliament enough. There's not enough voices out there. There's not enough people that believe what they're saying. I feel like some of the parties are just using LGBTQ plus members as tokens. It's like, yes, we believe in this. Here's our guy, but we need more of our community in there standing up and speaking, not people speaking for us.
Yeah. So I want to ask this question because I see these we saw the Me Too movement, and we have seen actually some significant change that's evolved from that. Rosanna, you're looking at me going, okay, maybe great. Disagree with me. What I feel like there has been maybe I don't know about in policy, but I've certainly felt it socially. And I'm hoping that we start to see that as well with what's happening now with the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, certainly the Me Too movement had a certain amount of impact. I think more in theory than in practice. Because literally, if you look at the hiring practices that followed in the years that followed the initial thrust of that movement, at least in Canada, the truth is that the hiring rates were still dominantly lean towards like cis white middle-aged male for the job, and so I think that yes, there are some visible choices that were made, which is great, and I'm of course very supportive of that, but honestly I don't think that enough has been done in terms of forwarding the causes of women of color, etc., in terms of as an offshoot from that movement. I don't think enough has been done. More in theory, not enough in practice.
Well, that's my fear about what's going on right now is like we're seeing this as, something that's trending. And I think that happens a lot today, is that things are trending and then people jump on it while it's trending. But that's why I opened with the question, have we already seen change? And how do we create lasting change? And like Adrian said to me on the phone, don't stop with this conversation today, Hart. You got to repeat it. And I totally agree. It has to keep coming up when it's not popular, right? Mm-hmm. But how do we create, Ingrid, maybe do you have a thought of like, how do we create lasting change in your?
Yeah. So to your point, Hart, I think this is much more than a trend. And I don't have the fear that it will in any way fade out, because the information is out there now. And it's out there in a way today that it couldn't have been distributed like this, 20 years ago. Now we have, directors like Ava DuVernay, who's putting out movies that clearly illustrate what the history of this systemic racism, what it is and how it started. So I don't think that I don't think it's a trend. I think we are witnessing, I believe, the tail end of what started in the 50s and 60s and that movement. You see, it takes a generation. Mm-hmm. It takes a brand new generation to like, oh, wow, what's going on? There are some people that are only now coming into the awareness of what systemic racism is, and that it comes from this implicit bias that people have. Before I get into what we can do, because I do want to focus on the solutions, I think it's important. You raised the question about police and what that looks like as a Black person. What it is, Hart, it's we all carry implicit, unconscious biases about other kinds of people that don't look like us. And for Black people, the bias that many white people have is that Black women are angry, or we're sassy, or we're hypersexualized, and that Black men are lazy, they are dangerous, and that they're criminals. And this is kind of a bias that is inbred in folks from their children, from what they witness, what they hear their parents talking about, and then they grow up and they have that. So these people also work in the policing system and enforcement. And so those biases will be exacerbated because they have the authority and they carry weapons. And if they're also bullies on top of it, oh my gosh, it's just, so that's where you'll see the sparks. That's where you'll see the flames. But I am of the opinion that all lives start with Black lives. All lives start with Black lives. And if the foundation is broken, we are all broken. So when we see the system starting to crumble, you're going to hear the screams come from those that are feeling it the most. But we're moving towards a genderless and a raceless perspective of life. You know, there is only one race. There's the human race, and we are all hues of the same human race. And that the idea of gender, that is slowly, we're moving towards a genderless society where we need to start to see each other. Now we can talk about what to do. We can start to see each other as souls moving through earth with these bodies that we were born into. But who I am on the inside, I'm very similar to the rest of you, but I might not look that way, you know? So it's to transcend the idea of race and what that is. And I think once we can do that and are open to doing that, which I believe this generation is, I mean, in terms of personal development and looking within and finding your center, this is where it starts before we can start to see the authenticity in the people around us and see past those implicit biases that some of us don't even know that they're there.
Yeah, so well put. Amazingly well put. You know what, for me, what really changed for me was, I don't know why, but at 17, I decided I had been subjected to almost an exclusively Jewish population growing up in Thornhill, and those were the schools that I went to. And for some reason I said at that age, like, nah, this is not the way life's supposed to be. It's not one kind of cultural background. And I had no money, but I had enough to get a plane ticket and move and traveled and worked abroad. And the minute I started doing that, I started working in bars and started doing things in other countries. I was able to expand upon that and go to more and more and more countries. And I've been to about 30 and at this point. And what's really been amazing for me is that anytime I meet someone of a different culture, I almost have an immediate connection because I may have gone to their country, you know, or and seen their people, and it sort of it opened my eyes. Now, not everybody's fortunate enough to be able to do that. So what can we do? For me, I'm trying to have my kids tune into this webinar this morning instead of going to homeschool and listen to things like this. My daughter was dying for me to talk about the fact that her Charlie D'Amelio had a Black Power symbol on her TikTok account. And so now it built awareness for her, what that meant, and made her start asking questions. Daniel, what do you think we could do? And you're from another background. I'm sure you've received your own biases or discrimination in your own way. What do you think we can do to make lasting change? Or what have you experienced in your life?
You know, I've been told many things by casting, by directors, specific to this industry. I've been told I am not Indian enough or not Indian looking enough. And I've been told that, it's hard to articulate because there's so many directors who have told me that, don't do this, do Bollywood. And I'm like, I'm not from there. I don't speak the language. The culture isn't representative of me. My entire family's from South America, other side of the world. So it's like for them, I just feel like a lot of people, they end up seeing me for my color and not seeing me for what I have to bring to a part, to a character, to the story. And it's a little disheartening a lot of the time.
Yeah. Daniel, I have a lot of students that start this program and they often ask me, am I going to work because I'm this race, or am I going to work because I'm big? Am I going to work because I have an accent? How do you and it's great because I want to segue into entertainment now. So it's good that you did this. How do you feel as a graduate? Do you feel that you have opportunity? Because I can tell you 20 years ago when I came into the business and I had friends of different color and whatnot, they did not feel like they were going to work.
Yeah.
Curious how it feels now as a new grad or recent grad, right?
In film and TV, what I find very interesting is 99% of the time, I am only seen for Middle Eastern, East Indian characters as very rarely open ethnicity. Whereas I find that commercials are always like, it's because they're looking for anyone and everyone. It's a lot of cattle calling. But I think that, and I was having this conversation with Andrew yesterday, the Americans, when they come here, they don't care. They're looking for the right guy for the right part, or right girl, or whatever. You know what I mean? They're looking for the right fit. Doesn't matter what you look like, what you sound like. If you fit, you fit. And I find that the Canadian casting agents, in my experience at least, they're so focused on forcing diversity for diversity's sake some of the time. And I've had this conversation with my agent as well. It's like, I feel that there's nobody in the industry that represents me. You know, I like, in people that I see, like my white friends will tell me, like, what about Aziz Ansari, you know, or Hassan Minhaj? I'm like, yeah, they're funny, they're great, but they don't represent me. I don't watch them and relate to them, you know, and it's
So
it's weird that,
is that because you don't see a lead character that's Indian in a show that's not about Indian? You know, like I find that we see that a lot on TV. It's like Kim's Convenience is yes, we have Korean actors, but it's very specific to being a Korean actor TV show, right? Like it's designed around that. Do you, and I could throw this around to Andrew and others, and I'm curious, like, do you think we should change that it, like, let's just write a colorblind show already and just make it like whoever is whoever, or are there benefits to just making a show that's like The Kink in My Hair? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I understand your question. So there are two ends of that. Yes, there are benefits to having culturally specific shows like The Kink in My Hair and, you know, Kim's Convenience and such, and like Little Mosque and the Prairie. But I think the important thing is, if you are going to do that, the writing has to be solid. You have to, and it has to tell honest, truthful stories. That's why we do this. Every artist on this panel is doing it consistently because we all have something to say. We all have our own part. We all, I say on a fair basis, make our own work. Andrew tells me this all the time: write your own thing, shoot your own thing, direct your own thing, because he does it all the time. So I follow that example as well. And I think it's important to continue that. So on the other end, it is important because we are part of the human race and are all part of an existence where we all have shared experiences that all lend to each other, speak to each other beautifully. And it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Andrew, throwing this to you, how do you think this movement will affect the entertainment industry, or will it?
I'm old, so I've seen this happen so many times where, you know, Rodney King beaten up, and then people say there's going to be change, and, you know, it doesn't happen, and then something else happens and they say there's going to be change. I honestly think that there just has been a gradual change happening all along anyway, and that one of the biggest changes has been to executive producers in America becoming women of color, and, you know, people like Shonda Rhimes rising to power and stuff. And I mean, first off, Americans have always been, my career has been thanks to Americans, and, you know, the fact that they need people of color to be in their TV shows, and I've always been treated with great respect. And also too, I've been given a lot of chances to play various different roles that, you know, like secret agents, or intergalactic samurai mentor, or, you know, like I've had chances to play an incredibly diverse number of roles, thanks to the Americans coming up and saying, you know, hey, just be good, you know, we don't care. So I really appreciate that, and I think that things are getting better and better. You know, like one of the things that happened to me last year, which I thought was amazing, but also kind of infuriated me, was last year I worked with my 7th female director from the past 30 years, and I've been working for 30 years, okay? So that's been 7 women directors that I've worked with, 5 of which I've worked with in the past 3 years. So for 30 years, I've worked with maybe 2 women. And it was just an assumption. And I knew people back in the 80s. I knew women who were amazing directors. And one of them just said to me, Andrew, it's a men's industry. It's a men's game. There's no point. And I just, And she just ducked out of the industry, and that infuriated me. I was like, no, stay, fight, be a pioneer. And she's like, I don't want to be a pioneer. I want to actually I want to actually pay my rent and get some money, maybe have some kids. I don't want to be a pioneer. So things are really changing gradually. I don't think that this incident necessarily is going to cause more change or anything. I think that more women are getting into positions of power, more women of color are getting into positions of power, and that's going to change things.
Rosanna, do you see that? Like, have you seen any change, like as a female director, what's been your experiences? Wait, Rosanna, you have to unmute yourself.
Oh, now I've got to mute myself. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, based on what Andrew's saying, I would agree. And being a female director, certainly, I find it very slow to change. I've seen lots of very talented women drop out of the industry. And I think it's been horrific to watch. And I've also been presented with the idea of be a pioneer. And in my own way, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that in my own lane. I kind of kept to my own lane. And I was having this conversation the other day with an artistic director in the live performing arts and the theater arts. And I made this comment about, every year when the Fringe Festival, which is an indie theater festival, comes around, there are often loads and loads of statements on social media about like, look at how many women are directing and writing plays and how many women participate. And I have to tell you, I always want to burn my computer, because I'm like, we shouldn't celebrate the fact that all of these women are not being paid, investing their own money out of pocket, and they're doing this because they're not getting jobs in those main companies. Right. And literally, if I went through, like female identified, women of color, etc., like this just gets even worse. And so I agree, some women are moving on up, and that's really great. I think it's too slow, and I really want to stop celebrating women doing projects exclusively out of their own pocket, because that's the only chance they'll get to direct that year.
Wow, great comment. I actually was going to get into talking about theater, but I wanted to kind of continue with this sort of talk about opportunities for people in theater and stories. One of the things that I was at a film fest party, and an agent had said to me, what do I need right now? I need women writers, and I need diverse actors. And so I've even seen it with agents coming to TFS that they're almost looking for diversity. I don't know if this is really panning out in the long term and whether people are seeing it, but are you seeing yourselves represented more on screen? Chad, do you see yourself more represented on screen? Now let's talk about the entertainment industry.
Well, yeah, I do feel like the LGBTQ plus community is being shown more. I feel like, it's taken us as pioneers to do our own things and to fight to be heard and tell our own stories. I feel like in the casting world, like it's always, I'm always going for straight characters. I'm always, going for the people are writing hetero roles all the time. And it's like, well, where do I fit in there? Okay, like I'll put on my straight hat for this role, but I want to audition for more roles that are LGBTQ plus.
Do you get bothered by seeing someone like Sean Penn play Harvey Milk? I mean, Sean Penn was brilliant in that role.
I don't think that I'm not saying a hetero person cannot portray an LGBTQ plus person, but I feel like they should be given more, like we should be given more opportunity to play ourselves, our own roles. Like even for example, in like October Faction, the lead star is hetero, but he's playing a gay character. I'd be curious to see how many actually gay people they saw for that role. I think it starts with casting, and just letting all people in.
Adrian, what about you? What do you think about casting? Like you've been going out for a bit and like, how do you see auditions that you're called in for?
I've noticed it changed. I've noticed that I've been given more of an opportunity to play different roles. I mean, in the commercial side of things, I've noticed now that I'm going in for the lead person, whereas before it was, whereas I'll be blunt, whereas before the lot of the choicey roles were going to white men and white women. I find now that I'm in the position where I'm being offered those roles, at least the chance to audition for them. And this is just in the commercial world. There is more of a focus on people of color and on diversity, but this is what we have to understand. And I'm going to be blunt here. The industry is the industry because of the way it is, and it's not going to change overnight. It's going to take a generation or two to change it. I look at things as more of a generational change and a demographic change. So what we really have to do is focus our attention on the younger generation. So as Andrew told Danielle many times, and I tell people, and Hart and I, we know this personally, we have to write and
Oh, Adrian,
produce,
you're cutting out. You're cutting out. Sorry, hold on. Say that again.
direct our own products, for a rich person's club, and a rich person's club. So that's how it is. And it's an uphill battle. So we just have to be aware of that. And I appreciate what Rosanna said about, let's not get too excited because women are producing and directing films on their own dime. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Two levels. We have to push for change in the industry that as it is right now, because that's one of the ways our voices will be heard. But also we have to educate the next generation and get them to realize that we have to be more equitable and inclusionary in everything that we do.
Yeah, and promote the great work and reward. I think it's also about rewarding, as like, I think that, as you say, you have to create, but then you have, and sometimes, Rosanna, that does take putting it out on your own dime, but then you have to reward the great work, right?
Well, that's the issue for me, is there's no continuity or very little. Right? Of course, I support developing your own projects, telling your stories, producing your own work. I definitely do. There is a spirit of that. But when that's really the main and almost exclusive alternative or option for a number of people, then that's where it becomes a problem. There's for me, it's a structural issue because there's no ladder to climb. You kind of have this kind of bottom pool majority independent artists, and then you have this kind of upper echelon, and there's not really a lot of steps in between. And
Yeah.
so for me, there need to be structural changes that are larger about ensuring that next generations have the opportunity to kind of train up or build up towards, other
Sure.
types of work.
Andrew, just before you jump in, because I'm going to direct this question to you, because I think you can comment to this a lot. I've seen discrimination of sorts in the theater community. Okay. And I would say that it's only really in the last few years that we've started to see Stratford and Shaw open up a little bit, which are the main theater companies in this country, right? Or the heavily funded ones. Are these, here's one of the things. I go to Shaw and I watch, and my friends are in Shaw, and the theater's terrific. I'm not, it's great. There's great performers. But look at the audience, right? Look at the audience of these festivals. They're white. They're old. So why are we publicly funding that audience in a way? Like those are the two main heavily funded theater companies. I'm not saying that there aren't others. There are. There's lots of little ones that get funding as well. But these aren't reaching diverse audiences. Do we need to change that structure? Because let's be honest, have they picked up on a lot? And maybe I'm wrong. Like, I haven't been going to Shaw or Stratford lately, but are they doing diverse plays? Are they integrating that into their lineup of shows? Andrew, I'm throwing this to you because I know you've been there.
You want to get me in trouble?
And then Laurel's saying, and actually, wait, Laurel is saying Stratford is not publicly funded.
A little bit. They do get some money from the yeah, they do. Like not a
So
lot though.
And here's
Like
another
if
question.
the Canada Council just stopped giving them money, they'd survive.
So then here's a question then to that, you know, based on what Laurel just said. If Stratford's not heavily publicly funded, does Stratford have a responsibility as a Canadian theater company to start diversifying far more than what they already are doing?
Okay, and very quickly, I want to say, I have to admit, I didn't think I would live to see the day when Factory, Theatre Passe Muraille, Soul Pepper, Obsidian are run by women of color. I
And they're
really
all
didn't.
based out of Toronto.
Yeah, and those are theater companies
Right.
in Toronto.
What about the ones that are?
really.
What about the regional stuff? Because the regional stuff has a huge influence in the political.
I know. Hold on a second. I'm getting there. Hold on a second.
Not just Toronto.
And here's the thing: like these women of color who are working at these like huge classic Canadian theater companies are amazing, but they won't necessarily do my work. Like, you know, just because they're women of color and just because they even like me or are friends doesn't mean that, you know. So the thing about Shaw and Stratford, like if you put people of color in charge or whatever, it wouldn't necessarily change the content. You have to create work that's going to sell tickets, right? And it's true that the community that goes to see shows at Shaw and Stratford are not diverse necessarily. And it's a double-edged thing. So you can create works for people of color to go see there, which is fine, and they'll go see it. At the same time, it's really hard to get people of color. I spent my whole career trying to get people of color into theaters, and it's work. You just have to work harder than you would normally.
So we go back to, so then, okay, so if the content can't be changed because Shakespeare's popular still.
Oh, it can be. Oh,
so
it can be. Oh,
let's
sure.
Let's say you can't, like, we want to stay with the similar content. Then we go back to this idea of colorblind casting. Should there be more colorblind casting?
Sorry.
So I just want to tell the story. 20 years ago, I worked with Thompson Highway. Thompson Highway is a very, Canadian, nationally celebrated Indigenous writer, and he wrote 2 plays. He wrote 3: Dry Lips Autumn Moves to Kapuskasing, Res Sisters, and then he wrote a 3rd part called Rose. And the thing that Thompson said to me, it's interesting, his slant, because he ended up doing the 3rd show as a cast where he used U of T actors, and we did it at U of T, and he couldn't get certain funding for various reasons, but Nervish wouldn't put it up on the main stage. It was a very controversial play, but one of the things he said to me was, it was so relieving to not have to make all 20 actors Indigenous. He said, even though I wrote it for Indigenous, I love the fact that it could be white actors and Black actors and Asian actors and all playing Indigenous roles. So this goes to my point about Stratford and Shaw. Are they diversifying their casting enough? Do they need to do more just so that we can start to get rid of this systemic, like, racism, I guess, so to speak, or representation of, like, are they doing enough? I don't know, Ingrid or Rosette. I don't go to Stratford, so I'm not to comment.
Sorry, I don't want to be misunderstood. I just wanted to say that if you want to get a more diverse audience, you have to just do plays that speak to them. And ultimately, Jackie Maxwell not only did she not want diverse actors in her company because she didn't feel comfortable around them, but also she didn't want to tell their stories. And it wasn't until she was sort of challenged to do so that she hired Phil Aiken to do a show once a year. But you just have to have leadership at the top who wants to actually put stories of diversity on stage. And I find that Stratford is more, I find Anthony Cimolino is just more open to it. He's just more open to diverse casting. He's more open to encouraging writers of color to write for Stratford. It's hard for Stratford. Stratford is learning that they can do Canadian plays more and more now. They have done in the past. And Stratford's made a lot of money. There have been very, very successful Canadian plays that have been on the Stratford stage, but they just stopped doing it after successive years of management. But Stratford just has to, beyond doing more works of color, but they just have to do more Canadian plays and plays by Canadians, people of color. And they do give money to artists of color to write write for them.
So, you know, I really I like that there's this conversation about it, but I do also want to move it into kind of what we see kind of in our school system itself, and even what Andrew was talking about is leadership. Sorry, what Adrian was talking about. It comes from great leadership, and leadership that recognizes that there needs to be change. And there needs to be something. I want to read just quickly for people joining us. After, with these events, Toronto Film School came out with a statement of solidarity. So I'm going to read what the school is now doing in terms of our leadership. So at Yorkville University and Toronto Film School, we have a long-standing institutional policy of inclusiveness designed to protect and nurture our wonderfully diverse community of students, staff, faculty, and alumni. Still, we recognize that real social change takes more than establishing policies and guidelines, and that if our institution is going to be a leader in areas of inclusivity and diversity, we need to work harder and do more. That understanding has inspired the following commitments. Yorkville U and TFS will appoint a diversity officer. This person will be responsible for helping to maintain and advocate for a diverse population within the schools. That individual will be instrumental in the development of a renewed diversity and inclusion policy for Yorkville University and Toronto Film School that includes concrete policies, procedures, and interventions aimed at improving the experience of traditionally marginalized persons studying at our institutions.
The other universities, they're not going to do it. They just don't want diverse students. I mean, Toronto Film School has done a great job with getting diverse students. It's done an amazing, it's probably the best I've seen in Toronto. But York, Ryerson, they don't want diverse students. They just don't. And just, like, why even bother?
Yeah.
Well,
you know what? I think it just comes down to the leadership of the school and the people that are in positions of power. I think it all comes down to that. And Adrian's talking about that with the Green Party. I'm talking about that with TFS. I went to and you have to almost go with a certain mentality that your motivation is to hire people that are more diverse than what you currently have in place. There has to be that mentality from that. Like I went to that. That's how I met Ingrid. I told Ingrid this last year. Was I went to a panel that was hosted about theater schools. I arrived at the panel. My only reason for going was because I wanted to find teachers of color. That was my only reason. That was why I went. When I got there, I think 99 of 100 people were, 98 of 100 were white, except for Andrew and now Ingrid, who's working for us. It was literally, that's what it was like. And I feel like our students need to see that, because then they can then become teachers and educators, and they have that to strive towards, or become creators or whatever in the future. And that's what that's my belief, how we can create change. Ingrid, what do you see at TFS in the classroom settings? Like, I know you've only been here for a short time, but what do you see in terms of what's going on in our school? And specifically, what I'd like to talk about from a teaching perspective, what do you see about script choices?
So first off, I see great talent in my classes.
Yeah.
And I do my best to nurture that talent. Wherever they are at, I do my best to nurture from where they're at to move them forward. You know, I had a student who I wasn't clear on their gender. And I felt, I'm sharing this because I remember feeling like I've never had that question. I've never had to question to myself, what gender is this student, is this person? And so in the few minutes before class started, they turned up, so it was just the two of us. And I just asked, you know, what is your pronoun? What's your pronoun? And they giggled and told me, and then it was cleared up. So communication is key because the times are a changing.
Yeah,
they have changed.
absolutely.
And we all need to get on the same page when it comes to language that's being used, because the language that you use has an energy to it. It has a definition that everyone is viewing it as. So if you want to be an effective communicator as an instructor to your students, you need to get on the same page as everyone and understand what the language is and how to communicate effectively. It's key. That's key to any relationship dynamic, but especially in the school. Yes, right, Rosanna?
Yeah.
Yes, and I would like to say that sometimes instructors are embarrassed or ashamed or uncertain or uncomfortable about learning new language or learning new things. And I really encourage educators to, it's okay to say you don't know, but it's not okay to not do anything about it, you know, and to not feel like, well, I'm the educator and so you must default to me. And in fact, actually, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves, because if I'm meant to educate anyone else, I have to be the one who's willing to take that first step forward.
That's right. Now, in terms of the school, I found when I started, I found that I felt that the scripts for the students were, well, I'll just say that I wanted to bring in scripts that the students could work on and feel free to be themselves and not feel insulted or in any way uncomfortable about the roles that they were getting, because I think in a learning environment, it's important that they have that freedom, and especially when they're paying for the education. So I think the focus in terms of what it is, the type of work that they work on should be to their benefit. Like, it's really all about raising the students, raising their level of knowledge and really nurturing their talent. So, you know, we've got examples out there. CBC has that show Digstown with a female black lead. She plays a corporate lawyer. And so there are examples of the possibilities for new actors and acting students of what is out there. And by the time they graduate, who knows what's coming down the pipeline in terms of productions that will be out there. So there's a lot of hope, I believe, in terms of work that is to be had, because any project that is being aired, if the audience includes people of color, Indigenous people, and Black people, then the content should reflect that. And if there's a question in the writing room as to the ability to translate these stories so that the characters are depicted in a way that is acceptable, then if that's not the case, then get some color in the writing room. I've been in a situation where there wasn't color in the writing room and it was reflected in the character that I was portraying. So we need to attack it in a few ways, in the classrooms as instructors, and if you're out there and you're creating content, in the writing rooms as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I've found that I've often struggled with, even in my own classes, is when I identify that you have something that might not really be applicable to that actor, I wonder, like, so should I go and find a script that is applicable to that actor, or do I let that actor play something that stretches them? And I guess that I have a couple questions. It's one I'm going to throw to Andrew, but I want to ask Chad and Daniel, as graduates, when you guys were in the classes, did you find that the scripts didn't apply to you, that you wanted to see stuff that was more applicable? Like, Chad, you've talked about that with going into the industry. Like, did you find you had to always play hetero and that was challenging?
I mean, there was no gay scripts, there was no LGBTQ scripts in Toronto Film School. I don't even think that I've seen any currently. And that's something that we need to change, you know?
So what could you do to change that? Like, and maybe this is something the students should think about. Like, is mentioning, because I would like to know more scripts that would be applicable. So what do you think we should do to change that?
Well, I think like if teachers can't go and find the scripts, then I think the students should be able to find scripts that they identify with, that they would like to play. You know, it's not like it's not going to challenge them. It's still going to be something to work on, and it's just going to create more change and more flow in the future. You know.
I remember when Patrice Goodman came on to teach, and I gave her a bunch of my scripts, and she said, "You know what? I really." And Patrice is Black, and she said, I have a lot of Black students in my class. I want to give them something that's more applicable to them. I said, Patrice, just please find it, like do that. That's what I want to see. And I think that by encouraging a more diverse faculty, we get that, right? Daniel, did you find the same experience to chat, or was it
similarly? But the thing is, because when I read the script, it's just words on a page. So I don't interpret the characters' race at all. I interpret the character as me. I picture me doing it. So, because I remember auditioning, I had Andrew as my teacher. So the scripts that I got, I felt like these are parts that I could play. But then when I would bring this stuff to like an agent, they go, "Yeah, you can't do that. You're not white." Or the casting agents won't see you in that way. So, going back to what Ingrid said, yeah, it does change in the writer's room. It demands of having more people in the writer's room making those changes and casting making those changes to open it up. And in the script say, it doesn't, like, the race doesn't matter, or the culture of the character doesn't matter. What matters is what they say.
And also, you do need to get a new agent. Eventually.
Eventually. I have to ask you this, Andrew, because this question I've been dying to ask you, and I know that this will open up a bit of a can of worms, but it's worth it. When you came to teach, to direct the shows last term, I had asked you to direct Riot. I saw that you had a classroom of numerous Black actors, like a number of them, and more than 50%. And I had asked, can you please do Riot? And one of the reasons that you provided, which is a fair reason, is I don't want to direct something that I've written, and that you didn't want to do your own piece with the students, which we can argue, because I think that actually has tremendous value. But then you ended up choosing, dare I say, the
whitest
play,
ever in Canadian theater history.
Well, it's the East Coast, and it's Glenda's husband, and it's like, fantastic writing.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit stumped because I thought this was sort of an opportunity, but then I also look at it and I say, well, why did you choose to go that route? And is there value in having people not play their own race, and to educate them what they may come across a lot of in the theater world? I don't know.
Oh, I feel very, again, I'm old, so I remember a time when, classic Canadian theater was seen as being something that we're not allowed to touch. So I feel very passionately that we need to give access to actors of color to all of Canadian theater. Doesn't matter who wrote it, doesn't matter when it was written, as long as it's not insulting or whatever. But I feel very passionately that the canon of Canadian theater should be accessible to everybody, because there was a time when, as a young Black actor, it was made very clear to me that it's not for me. I should stay in my lane. But so I feel very passionate about classic Canadian theater and giving access to young people. And I also feel very passionately about, like, the audition sides that I collect for my audition class. I work very hard to try and make sure I get lesbian scripts, gay scripts. I'm still looking for something transgendered. They're just hard to find in the world, like good scripts that have transgender characters, but also to have audition pieces that have transgender characters. But I do make sure that I have Black roles, and I do. The problem is, like, I have to give a young Black actor a slave role, because they're going to audition one day for a slave role, because it's just out there. That's what it is. And also too, like, one of the challenges is that many of the gay scripts that I have deal with homophobia, and that's kind of it. It's not like I've got a few scripts where the gay character is just living life and just having a conversation, but I do have scripts where gay characters are struggling with the homophobia, and it's because those are scripts that are written, they're from real movies. They're from real TV shows. So it's not like I'm having someone make them up. I always get audition scripts from actual professional TV, film, and movies. But that the other issue is that for many years, you know, you'd have a script, you'd have a black person because they're dealing with race. You'd have a gay person because they're dealing with homophobia. You'd have, you know, so it's hard to find. So I also think it's important just to give a South Asian actor a role playing a TV executive, even though I've got a script for a South Asian actor who plays a convenience store clerk, you know, and the South Asian scripts that I have, it's just bad accent stuff. Like it's just kind of cheesy, and I have those scripts because they're from real movies and real TV shows, but sometimes the real movies and TV shows are insulting. And
Can I say something?
Andrew, I'm going to throw it to you, Adrian, in 1 second. I just want to read a comment from Glenda, whose husband, David French, wrote the plays that Andrew inevitably directed with a large contingency of black actors. And Glenda wrote, "Can I just say that it has been one of the great joys of the last few years of my life to see diverse casts playing David's characters. I'm so happy and grateful that Andrew chose his work last year." Thank you for that. Just a little.
And to be honest, I was directing it going, oh, I'd love to be in this show.
And you did a great job piecing the multiple scripts together into one, and the actors did a great job. I'm just bringing it up as a topic. Yeah. Adrian, I want to throw it over to you because you've been waiting to say something.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't limit ourselves to the work that's out there. Yes, there's value in respecting the.
Oh no, he's cutting out.
Oh no,
Adrian, you keep cutting out whenever.
Adrian, say it again, Adrian.
Adrian, go into your take your video.
We have to create our work. Can you hear me now?
Adrian, say it again.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Say it again. Say what you just said again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my video's off. Yeah, there's definitely there's value in giving and showing respect to the work that's out there in terms of Canadian literature and playwriting and stuff like that. But we have to create our own work, and we mustn't limit ourselves to what is historically out there, because if we and that is the situation right now. We have to lead by example in terms of being teachers and educators and people in power to hire people of color, hire people coming from equity-seeking groups, and we must educate ourselves and take responsibilities for our action. But if we want change, we have to make that change. You know, Hollywood is a white boys club, a white men's club, and a rich person's club. So, you know, if you're going to play that game, know what you're getting into. Canada is pretty much the same way in terms of at Stratford's or Shaw, it's, you know, older white people going to see shows because they have the money and they have the time. If we want to have a more diverse audience, then we have to create work that a more diverse audience would be appreciative of. I mean, I don't want to sound callous here because I'm not. I don't mean to be, but let's not play the victim. Let's take control of the situation and do that we know can be done better. Because as I said earlier, it's a generational change and there's a bit more of a demographic change, and we have to create space for the younger generation coming out. The students on this call right now, I'm saying to you, write your work. You know, be prepared to produce it, even if it's on your own dime, because you're making way for other people coming up in the industry. And that's the situation we are right now in our society.
I love that you say that because it reminds me that Brad Pitt, who was behind the movie Moonlight, people don't necessarily know that, but it was his company that got behind Moonlight, which brought together the dual issue of homosexuality and the black community. And you know what he said? The movie, like it won Best Picture, and the movie didn't make money, you know? And that's part of the challenge. I think that the struggle of it is that we aren't accessing, or the general population isn't accessing these great movies that they have the potential to access. And that's why I said to Ingrid, please post and tell your students. And I had a student that came to me, Obi, and I think he's tuning in, is saying, let's start celebrating these movies in our film history class. Let's start talking about those issues that, those things that we need to celebrate, because we're not celebrating that. We're celebrating the white Hollywood history. Let's celebrate black Hollywood.
Let's make something clear. Americans only care about money. some of the biggest money-making movies have been by people of color, and they haven't been great movies, but they've, like the Medea series, made a ton of money. People of color in America, and the thing that I love about Americans, and I have a lot of respect for it, they do not care about your skin color. They really don't. They just care about making money, and they just want to be successful. The works by people of color in America that have made money have been populist works that it's nowhere near as good as Moonlight, but they make money. And some of the biggest stars in America are people of color.
Yeah, but it would be nice to expose people to great content too. I get what you're saying, Andrew. I do get what you're saying. Look, John Singleton is like one of my favorites. I mean, Boys in the Hood is one of the best movies I've ever seen, and it was a popular.
Also,
those things.
Some of the biggest
right?
some of the biggest TV shows have had black executive producers. Like Lost had a Canadian black executive producer. His name is Stephen Williams. He used to be a director up here, and he went down to America, but started working in TV, and has become a huge success in America. Like there are some very powerful people in Hollywood who are women. People in the LGBTQ community, and so I mean, for years, Hollywood has been run by white dudes, sure, yeah, but Hollywood really has changed, and it's reflected in the work that comes up here. So there's so much work. Guys, right now in Canada, you have Amazon, Netflix, NBC, CBS, ABC, like everybody's coming to Toronto to shoot. There's so much demand for work. There's so much demand for actors. The most important thing you got to do is make sure you're really good. And so go to the Toronto Film School, learn how to act.
Good. It's I want to bring up one last question, and then I do want to open it up to some questions from because people are posting a lot of things on the side. I don't know if you noticed that, but people are posting.
Yeah.
But I want to open this up to teachers specifically, and that is, there has been, and I've seen it probably more than all of you, but there's lots of racist comments that come into play in classrooms. Lots of discriminatory things that people say. People bring their baggage into the classroom. It doesn't belong, and we don't want it, but it comes and it enters into the classroom. And in some cases, for some people, unfortunately, going to TFS is their first time that they've ever really come across someone that isn't like them. And so it is an education for them. What do you think we should do as a school to set it up right off the bat, to kind of make students aware of their rights and what's acceptable conduct? Like, what can we do to improve that? Roseanne, I want to throw this to you because I know you have a lot of experience in teaching at various schools and education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, and I was speaking with Chad last night about this. Is in one of the places that I taught at, there was actually a code of conduct booklet that was given to students, and they had to sign it like a contract. Just as they were signing up as a contract for coming to the school, they also had to sign the secondary contract on the code of conduct, which included elements of dealing with racist commentary, dealing with sexist commentary, dealing with et cetera, et cetera. And I thought it was beneficial because it wasn't just like, this is what you need to do, but it was also, here are the resources. And here are some educational components, you know, and they were very accountable. So should, let's say, a student, you know, break one of the codes of conduct, if you will, there was actually a reporting system in place where, is that my mic? I don't know. Where there would be follow-up. Do you know, there'd be follow-up with the educator who might have been, you know, the teacher in that particular class. There'd be follow-up with the artistic director or the head of the program. And the student would be called upon to even do research into the topic to be able to gain some education on this. And I think that there's something about that practice that maybe not literally directly as it happened in that particular instance, but I think there is something about, it can't be just about what you can't do, but it's about why you can't do that.
Yeah.
And if there's an educational component to it, I think that we should implement policy in and around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have a comment to that?
Well, I'll say,
I do,
yeah,
actually.
I like
Go
that.
ahead. Go ahead.
Just let Ingrid. Yeah, we'll go for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that idea of the contract right at the outset that's issued by the school, because it puts a specific responsibility on each student right at the outset. But you know, it comes right down to respect that happens in the classroom, and that's something that I ensure right out the gate. I show it. As an instructor, I show them the utmost respect, so that when it's not given back to me or to the other, or amongst themselves, I call it out and I don't stand for it. So any kind of disrespect, I mean, racist remarks falls under disrespect, anti-LGBT, that all of that falls under disrespect. And if we're all there for the purpose of learning and sharing information and performing and growing as artists, then respect has to be first and foremost. So it's an issue about respect for one another.
Yeah. Chad, I want to ask about the student body. Like, we know we have to do certain things as teachers. What's the student's responsibility in that?
Well, the student's responsibility is to adhere to our standards that Toronto Film School sets out, right? If we have this new policy in place, then they need to be held accountable. And we as teachers can't be worried about, that interrupting that scene or anything like that. No, call it out right there, make them accountable, and don't let them back until they've resolved that issue. Because if we want to train the professionals in the next generation in this industry, right? So we have to set those standards in place for them, so that when they graduate, they will be more open. They will have more respect for people out there.
I had a classroom, I don't want to call out anybody, but I had a classroom where we had a significant issue with a student that was making racist comments. The students called this person out on it. We ended up in a meeting with the students and all of them together in one group. I ended up having to meet with all of them. What I learned from that situation is what I talked about earlier, was that the student really came from a background where she wasn't exposed at all to Blacks, and she had a very like a strong stereotypical feeling towards them, and was insensitive in some of her commentary. I was really impressed that the students in the class, in particular the Black students, although they were offended, they actually agreed to allow this person another chance. And I felt that was the best thing that happened out of that situation, because they said, we'll give her a chance so that she learns, right? And I've heard that argument before, is that the best thing to do with a white supremacist is you want to have instead of yelling or screaming or telling them that they're wrong, you want to have a conversation with them first and foremost, right? Because it's about learning in order to create change. I'm going to give this to Adrian. He's been wanting to talk, and then I want to go to some of the questions online. So Adrian, you had something to say. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for that. Is it still good, the audio?
Yep.
Yeah. Accountability is key. I really love that example of education, because we all have to share our lived experiences, because that's how we learn from this. One thing that's important along with the code of conduct is equity, diversity, and inclusionary policy. Almost every institution, non-profit, professional, should have a policy, and they should have training on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Same thing with an anti-oppression policy. There has to be a policy in place at every institution, and there has to be training, because we need to unlearn a lot of our bad behavior and learn more, because we live in a very diverse world. Toronto in Canada is one of the most diverse places on the planet. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to acclimatize yourself with for everyone. Even myself, and I've been here since I was 6 years old. So Yeah, learning is key. Education is key. You have to have policies in place, but you also have training that goes along with that policies.
Adrian, I'm going to introduce you to people at TFS to talk about this because, like in the senior management people, because actually, TFS has made this statement that we are finalizing our existing plans to roll out diversity and cultural sensitivity training in the coming weeks. So it will be a really good opportunity to have you speak with the right people. So remind me of that. I want to throw this out to people in the Q&A. If you have questions, we're going to keep going for a little bit. I don't know if anybody has to leave. We're already half an hour over, but I'm here. I can keep going for a bit, but I want to throw it out to the students to ask questions. By the way, this isn't just acting students that are here. It's also production students. We've opened it up to the entire school. And on top of that, we have it on YouTube, so people are able to tune in and check it out. Here's a question from the audience. How often in 2020 do you guys find yourself auditioning for strictly stereotypes rather than amazing characters who just so happen to be of a diverse culture? And is there a difference in how often you see between the union versus the non-union industry? So Daniel, you've been talking a little bit about this, and Andrew, what do you think?
In my experience, no. The actual rules, like for the Canadian TV shows, is predominantly stereotype, and that's like come in with the Indian accent. So I've had to learn how to do one so I could pass for one in the room. And then the non-union roles I find are a lot more opening up. They're not. It's the same thing. They're not really looking for a specific type of person, just looking for the right person, like the right fit. A really negative experience I had a few years ago, and this is, I think, the first time I'm sharing this. I was in an audition room auditioning for an indie feature. And I remember sitting there in the room, the writer, the director, and one of the producers were the panel, and they had a reader. And I heard the writer say, "I don't want to audition a sand," insert the N-word, "for this part."
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I was saying to Daniel that, at the beginning of my career, I was given a lot of stereotypical, like playing gangster number one, gangster number two roles. But over the years, I just got to a certain stature, and I was exposed to certain roles. And at a certain point in time, you do enough work where casting directors just know that this is the kind of thing that they'll audition you for. And also too, I worked really hard on making sure that my talents were wide. So I wanted to get as many different kinds of roles as possible. So I worked really hard on being a really good actor and auditioning really, working really hard on my auditions so that even if I don't get the part, the casting directors knows, well, oh, he can also do this. Oh, he can also do that. And so I get sent up for everything now. And I'm at that point in my career as well where I can just turn stuff down. Then if I get offered, there was one thing I was offered. What was it called? It was like Dirty Santa or something. And it was like a really bad, really, really bad black character accent role or whatever. And I just said, yeah, no. And it turns out that it was starring Mel Gibson. So thank God.
Go figure.
I try not to work with
discrimination, eh?
I try in my career not to work with anti-Semitic, bigoted Australians. I just try really hard.
I'm going to ask people if you can put it in the Q&A section. I know a lot of people are putting in questions in the chat room, but if you can put it in Q&A, it's just easier for me to funnel through. But I have a question about what do you do when a teacher is indirectly discriminating you? And what about age discrimination? I'm going to respond to that as a program director. If anything comes up of that nature, you have to go to your student advisor, which is Emily Levine, and you have to file a formal complaint. And that's the thing that's around a teacher, that's around another student. You have to take the measure to go to the department and actually do a filed formal complaint. And that will require more effort. And you do have to understand that no matter what it is that you bring to the forefront, we have to ask all parties what transpired. Just because you say someone said something racist, or you said someone did something that was that was harassment, sexual harassment, anything of that nature, it immediately requires an investigation. it can't just be assumed that what you say happened. We have to listen to everyone, but that is the step that you have to take in order for it to go further. The other point is about age discrimination. Rosanna or Ingrid or
Why do I get
what?
the age discrimination question?
Or well, just because you guys are the faculty.
And I don't. Wow, really? Hmm.
You were next in line. I'm sorry. Should I have started with the bald guys?
I find this discriminatory, Hart, that you were asking me about the age discrimination question.
No. I'm too young to know.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Honestly, Rosanna, I did not mean it.
Okay. I will say that, you know, I agree. I think age discrimination is still a big factor in the industry, and you know, because I feel like I've spoken a little bit about in particular women in the industry, I think that there is kind of this strange gap that exists in casting for women. That there's kind of like young little ingenues, and then like much older, and in between, there's not a lot of material there. If there's age discrimination in a classroom situation, like, again, I think there's a reporting system in place. You need to, you know, make mention of that, but also don't, you know, I think don't be afraid to initiate a discussion about this, maybe with your instructor privately, or, you know, even in the class situation.
What does that look like age discrimination? Like, what does that mean? If you're a 50-year-old actor who's in a class of 20-year-old students, like, you want to be cast as the 20-year-old? Is that sort of what you're indicating? What does that mean?
That you're only being cast in kind of the mumsy things, or the, you know, I'm not sure, right, in terms of that particular experience, that person's particular experience. But yeah, sometimes it's about, again, it's a different way of stereotyping, but it's like, oh, okay, so you're a woman of this certain age, so then you're only going to play mumsy type roles, you know? So yeah, it would depend on that person's individual experience, but I think with any form of discrimination, it's about following protocols and also communicating, because education happens once we open our mouths and share what those issues are and find means, develop solutions, exchange experiences, so that we can all learn and evolve from this. Do you know?
Yeah, and I'm just going to follow that up. I've got a follow-up question about when a student is being sexually harassed. What do you do if you're concerned about that? And the school will offer the counselor. Absolutely, the school will offer the counselor, but it goes back to my initial statement. You have to file a formal complaint, and you have to step forward and say, I am filing this complaint. Otherwise, we cannot do anything about it. It has to be investigated. So it requires a formal complaint and then an investigation. And that is the step for every single issue that comes up. And you have to be open to say, this is what happened to me. And that's often a challenge for students. I want to go to this next question here, which it's interesting because this is coming up right now. I think as an artist school, TFS could maybe even offer courses that encourage students to think critically. Perhaps a global studies elective that encourages students to think about topical global issues from an artist point of view. I think that a course like this can help students be more critical and aim to be more substantial with the art that they produce. We have a responsibility to the world, especially being part of such an influential industry. Could TFS make this adjustment and offer every student a course that addresses this? And thank you, Nikki. And I know everybody's saying well said. I totally am in agreement with this. And we have already been in the works of doing that. So myself and Mercedes, who is the curriculum developer, have been talking about this for months, and we're working on it. We've been trying to get through all of the courses, and now that we're actually completed all of the outlines and courses, that's our next thing that's on our list. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's just to let you know that it has been addressed. I'm just going through more questions. Sorry, I'm looking up here on the side.
You know, I wanted to quickly answer a question about, one of the students had a question about how do I write for people of different cultures? That's not my own. And I think that that's a great question. It's a very, it's a big issue right now. And I would say the most important thing is do your research, hire people to work with you who are from that culture, that gender, that whatever. Because as a writer, like, you can't just, if I'm a white guy, I can't just write white guy characters. I can't. That's just not the world. If you're creating art, you're reflecting what's happening in the world. I just wrote a play about a young Afghan woman. To do that, what did I do? I researched. I spoke to a young Afghan woman for like years, and to create the play, I hired Muslim actors. They weren't all from Afghanistan. You can't have, like, it's hard to find actors just from Afghanistan, but you can hire actors who are from Iran, who are from Palestine, who are from Pakistan, you know, and they will tell you, they will say, actually, Andrew, a Muslim would never do this, just so you know. And you go, oh, okay, sorry, I had no idea. And you listen respectfully, and you work hard to represent their truth.
Yeah, great. Sorry, someone's audio is doing weird things. I don't know who that is, but turn yourself off.
Probably Daniel.
Here's
It might be me. I'm going to mute myself.
It was Daniel. Here's another question. As a cis white male entering the industry, what can I do to help promote diversity on sets and writers' rooms without being in a position of power to hire people? And
nothing.
I believe this person said, I am from London. I applaud the conversation. A little late to the party, but I'm always trying to get a better understanding of diversity. So that's the question.
When you're starting out, you have no power. So just get in and get work, and work as often as you can. And then as you work more and as you gain in stature and you become more powerful, then you can start these conversations. But the most important thing for everybody, doesn't matter what color you are, just get on set, get a role, and work harder to become a better performer. And then when you are in positions of power, to be able to affect hiring, absolutely, you know?
Yeah. I keep going through things like, and someone brought up the question about accents, and that comes up a lot.
Very quickly,
Kirsten said, I've heard that agents here in Canada tell actors often, I'll put you on the roster once you get rid of your accent. How do we speak to this? I've always tried to prepare my students that this might happen to them, but it's a hard and unfair thing to explain sometimes, but I feel like I want to address it so it doesn't come as a shock once they're looking for agents after graduation.
Oh my gosh, I'd like to speak to this.
Yeah, sure.
Your accent can be your power. It's what makes you you. So long as you can tell the story. Well, first of all, so you're an actor, you have a strong accent. Can you be understood? That's the essence. That's what we're talking about here. Can I understand you when you're speaking? Because if I can't understand you, I'm not going to get the story. The audience is not going to get it. It doesn't make sense. If you can be understood and you can tell the story, you can tell the story of pain or of triumph or of joy or of loss with any accent. So any agent that says, well, I'll take you once you lose your accent, they're missing out on potentially one of the best talents that walk through the door. If it's going to come down to that, then that's not the agent for you. You want the agent, I'm speaking to the actors out there, you want the agent that can see your performance ability and can see that you can draw in an audience. You know, an audience should be able to watch a movie completely in another language that they don't know and still understand the journey of the character. That is where great performance comes from.
Absolutely.
So your accent, you know, it's and in terms of like, you know, when you're learning a role or you're studying for an audition and then they say, you know, you've got to have a Boston accent or some sort of regional accent. I just want to say to all the actors out there, leave that for the end. Don't worry about the accent. Concentrate on who the character is. What do they want? How are they going about getting it? What's coming up? What's getting in the way for this character that creates the complexity in the performance? Once you've ironed all of that out and you're comfortable in who this character is and what they want, then you can fiddle with the accents and even, you know, choreograph yourself, hit it on certain words so that it doesn't become this, you know, I've got to do the accent. The scene is not about the accent. The scene is about the journey of the character. And it doesn't matter what the work is. It doesn't matter who wrote it. That is the core of the performance.
Absolutely. I agree. Exactly my philosophy when I'm teaching, and what I'll say to students is exactly what you've just said. And if there are words that they have mispronounced, I make a point of letting them know. I also used to be an ESL teacher, so it's part of me, but I'll make a point of letting them know so that they can go home and work on that so it's communicated and understood by the audience. And that's what our jobs are as educators. And later on, when they're in the business, they can focus on accent correction later. I want to get to something.
I would agree. I was just going to say really quickly. Yeah, absolutely, Ingrid. The most important thing is to be a really good actor. That's it. So first off, just work on being an excellent performer. And also, like, if you have a Chinese accent and there's a role for a Chinese person with a Chinese accent, you'll get that role because you've got that accent. But it is important for actors, all Canadian actors, to learn an American accent. I've had American directors scream at me, Andrew, it's sorry. They've screamed at me. And they will. The Americans they have no problem just going, Andrew, stop it. It's about, what the hell? So get rid of your Canadian accent. You really can't have a Canadian accent.
I was on a set where an American actor was told to say, can you drop the American about? Because it was a Canadian thing.
Finally.
I have two questions that are kind of related and a response that's related. And then I want to throw this sort of towards Rosanna and Chad a little bit, because you might be able to comment from whether it be racial or sexual harassment, should or can we call it out, not necessarily yelling at them, but just speaking about it right there in the classroom and report it. And then I had a follow-up question, which are kind of related to, if you do complain or bring it to light and you have a fear of being treated differently or even it be worse than it was, is it worth complaining about it, especially when your future and reputation is on the line? Really big, important questions, especially when it comes to things of, all discrimination, but sexual harassment in particular. I think of that when I hear that question. But I hear a response from one of our students that had an incident like this. On that topic, Hart knows I had problems with another student in my term 1 because an incident came up that was a sort of a stereotypical and discriminatory comment. What I found out later on is that the teacher from that class made that agreement about the code of conduct, and she went over it with all of the students on the first class because of what happened to me from the previous term. And she felt like that was really helpful, that the students need to know that they can speak up with the problems that they're having. And in her experience, it was great in how it was dealt with. Maybe I wanted to throw this to you, Rosanna, because you've been very passionate about these kinds of topics. What do you think about the two questions I asked?
I think you need to speak up. If you feel comfortable and safe speaking up, I think you need to speak up, and you can speak up in the moment. One thing, referencing back to what we said before, is let's say, two performers are in the middle of working on something and a comment comes up or an action comes up that is sexist, racist, abusive, etc. in any way. As an instructor, don't wait till the scene is over to call it out. Stop the scene where it is, address it in the moment, because we don't want to give an impression that it's permissible to keep going after statements or behaviors of that sort. So I think you do need to say it. I think you need to speak to it in the moment. And but the truth is some people will not feel safe. And in which case there is a reporting system in place, which is amazing, but there's also a counseling system in place. And it's okay to turn to the counseling system first to help you navigate the feelings around the experience that you may have had. Not everybody's going to feel like, I can just speak up. And that's okay too. That's valid and important for you to honor what you feel you need to do to move forward. And that's going to be different for different people. But we do have more than just one protocol. There's a reporting system, but there's also a counseling service. And then there's also speaking up in the room. In terms of this idea of like, I'll lose my career, et cetera, like this is I find this to be the most difficult question, because the truth is those types of conversations still very much exist in the industry. I've spoken to artists who are in their 50s and 60s who have experienced abuse, sexual abuse or sexual harassment in the workspace. And they're very much in favor of not saying a damn thing because of this belief that they'll never work again, you know. And so it's not like it's just from emerging actors who feel this. There is this feeling across the board. But I've also seen courageous acts from both, you know, young emerging artists, as well as, you know, established or more experienced artists, of stepping forward and calling out for what it is. Do I believe that you can compromise your career? I'm sorry to say that I think that has happened in the past. Do I think it should stop you from speaking up? No, I don't. Because if we're going to make any change, then the truth is we need to speak up, and we need to call it out, and we need to address it. And you don't want to work with that person anyways. And, you know, like, so I really think that it is time to talk, and it's not about one person being brave, but I think it's about all of us locking hands and saying, okay, no more.
Yeah, that's
No
great.
more.
I want to give the students just because I know that we've had so much time with everyone, and there's a interesting topic, and then I'll throw this out to, I guess, Chad, Daniel, as former students. But we had an interesting discussion at the faculty meeting, which all of you, except for Adrian, was there, and it came up. What do we do about, and Kirsten's asking about that, what do we do about scripts with sensitive subject matters? We don't know the student's history, and what should we do? Or should students do a script if it hits too close to home and we as teachers are unaware? And then the other thing that came up, which happened in Jack Mosshammer's, which is a challenge, is improv, and dealing with improv where stuff gets said in a moment in an improv scenario, and how do you as a teacher deal with that in the moment? So Rosanna, I guess it plays to this idea that we should deal with it in the moment. But I also think that one of the things I've learned from one exercise that came out where a student was using Django Unchained, and the N-word came out. It was Leonardo DiCaprio's script. And there were a few Black students that were so offended, and rightfully so, but they said, if I had known prior to them starting that this was what it was, and this was what was going to be addressed, then I wouldn't have had as much of an issue. And if I would have had an issue, then I would have said, you know what, I don't want to hear this. I'm going to leave. Another teacher at the time said to me, that's BS. That script should never be used. It's a controversial thing, right? Because then we're getting into censorship. I mean, it is Django Unchained, Quentin Tarantino. Did you guys experience, Chad or Daniel, any scenarios like this that ever happened? Incident, discrimination came up in class and what happened?
Well, it was an issue with the script. I think it was The Wire. Ingrid, I was working with you this day. I don't know if you remember. It was a term 2 class, camera 2, and the N-word was in the script. And the students were asking, like, should we say the word? Is it okay? Because it's in the script. And it is circumstantial. And Ingrid, you can probably speak to this because you handled the situation really well.
Sure. Well, it wasn't my class, though. I was substituting for another teacher. Yeah. So, and it was a surprise to me as well, in fact, because I didn't know what scripts they were using. And so we're reading it, we were kind of reading it together and doing it together. If I remember correctly, I allowed it and I let it go because of the context of the scene, the conversation, as well as the quality of writing. The fact that it was telling the story and it made sense. And also I wasn't personally offended. And I gotta start with me and my own sort of vibe. How did I feel in that moment? I understood, and also the actors respected the script. And so they weren't, the discomfort came because there was no forewarning. There was no forewarning, but we went ahead, and after we talked about it, it then became about the scene and the characters and developing the scene, and we moved past it, but we did address it.
Chad, what about you? Did you
Yeah, well, I've seen like there's been a couple instances where students have come out later on and saying that they are uncomfortable with this role. It hits too close to home, and I think students, once they get scripts that are assigned by their teachers, to have that conversation right away. If that is a sensitive material, let us know. We will address it right there, and we will switch it, right? Because everybody's going to have different comfort levels, you know.
Can I just add another thing? I forgot the major thing. The student who this role was given to, the character was a Black character, but the student was a white student who was using the word. Okay, I forgot.
That was the same incident that we had where it was a Filipino, I believe, actor using playing a Black character.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, to play to this, like, I do feel if we're going to start to get into colorblind casting, then it has to go both ways, right?
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel uncomfortable with that, Adrian? Like, if a white actor is playing a Black role?
Let me mute my video. No, I think it's totally in context, and we have to be mature enough to deal with the topic and face it head on. We can't be afraid to use certain words or afraid to use certain phrases because of sensitivity. No, let's be adults. Let's ask for permission. You know, if you know, are you okay with me saying this? Is this okay? Is the context right? You know, get some clarity on the whether it's right for the role or right for the part, and then be brave. You know, if it's part, and I support Ingrid on this. I commend her for, like, yeah, go with it. I mean, if it's okay with you, if in your personal being, if it's okay, go for it. Don't be shy. Just be open about the communication and about the purpose of using the word or words.
Andrew, did you want to say something?
I would add to that, at the beginning of my classes now, at the beginning of the semester, I always have a speech where I say, look, in the world of acting, you are going to be given scripts that could be triggering. The most important thing is that you're mentally healthy. So make sure you are healthy. You can't be a firefighter if you've got a broken leg. So, you know, and if you get a broken leg, you go to the doctor. So if you are an actor and you have mental health issues, you go to the doctor, you get healthy. That you have to be healthy to do this job. And second, I've got a lot of scripts that deal with human beings in crisis, because that's what we tell stories about. If ever I give you a script that is triggering for you, let me know. You don't have to do it. It's not a big deal. It's not. We're not here to deal with. If I give you something that's triggering, we don't have to do it. I'll give you another script. It's not that big a deal. And in your career, you can have that conversation with your agent. You can say to your agent, look, I don't want to do a script where I play someone who's getting raped or someone who's getting killed or someone or whatever. Or there are actors out there who don't do kissing scenes. There are actors who work. They work a lot, but they will never ever kiss a woman or a man on the lips.
And they definitely won't be doing that during COVID-19.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I do want to I want to just comment on one last thing here. And this is so important because you're so right about what you just said, Andrew. And that is your mental health and physical health comes first. And that is the most important thing. And one of the things that TFS is always that we worked really hard to provide was counseling services at the school. And so I do want to say from the program that it's, you know, for any students, staff, or faculty who are struggling during this time, there are support services to assist. It's the tfsjaneapp.com where you make an appointment. And that is a resource that you have, and it's so important to access it. I want to say to all of you, thank you so much. Look at how diverse we are, just even in our team, right? It's so important. It's always been so important to me, but I know it's important to everyone. And I think it's really great that we started this as one of my students is writing right now. Communication is key. And it is. That's what this is about. Adrian and I were saying, like, we need to reinforce this. We need to come back again and keep talking about this, even when the noise dies down a bit, right? There's going to be the need to keep talking about this and keep creating and doing what we do best, right? Thank you. Love you guys so much. Thank you so much for doing this. so appreciate your time. So many students came to watch this, and it's been on YouTube. We're recording it so that people can still access. Thank you so much for giving us 2 hours of your time. Really, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Hart. This was a brilliant idea. Thank you for having us. It was a great discussion.
Thank you. Have a lovely weekend.
Thank you.
We're gonna go out with wait, there it is. A Love Supreme.